Welcome to Fellow Talk. This is a Field Notes episode where we talk to industry experts and get that pulse check.
Today we'll be speaking to James Warden from ePay to find out what's going on in their world right now and what they'd be remiss not to note down. For the chronically curious, this is Fellow Talk.
Cool, James. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us on today's show. First of all, let's just let you introduce yourself. Tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do.
Perfect. Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. So I've been in the consumer experience space for my entire career. So it started at HP, then into Microsoft, and for the last, 11 years at ePay. There is different roles within that, but ultimately the common conduit throughout the whole thing is a consumer obsession. So whether that's as a retail account manager and creating retail experiences for Microsoft, or creating products and solutions for ePay, and now looking at the digital revolution in the regulated gaming space, the common thread throughout, which hopefully we'll talk about today, is around how do we drive really great consumer experiences.
So, James, what's been keeping you up at night lately? In your sector, in your work life, in your life more generally?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. It's good to be here. I was thinking about this on the way over this morning as I walked through my sleepy market town to get to the train station. And I had two really interesting kind of back-to-back experiences that I thought was worth talking about. As I walked through the high street, and my wife owns two small beauty salons as well, so the high street's really important to me and to us as a family. As we walked through, I noticed how many vacant properties there are at the moment. And I just, I work for ePay, part of the Euronet group, and we're a $4 billion business. And I think we have tough times, but we've got, a lot of money in the bank account. We have 60,000 ATMs full of cash. But I imagine how difficult it must be for entrepreneurs trying to run sustainable businesses in the high street. And I thought, how do you create really meaningful experiences? There's not a lot of support out there. And I thought that was really a difficult challenge. And then, and forgive me for going for graphic detail, but I've got a small problem in my foot at the moment. So I phoned my local podiatrist. And as I got through to them, it was kind of just before 8 o'clock. So I wasn't expecting an answer. And I thought I'd just leave a voicemail. And I got an AI receptionist to answer the phone. And it was a brilliant experience. It was very open about AI. I said, I'm an AI receptionist. How can I help you? I had a full dialogue with the AI receptionist. I booked an appointment. I got exactly what I needed when I needed it. I prompted that I wanted a text reminder. So they took my mobile phone number, and 10 minutes later I had a text confirming my appointment. And I thought they've got this really interesting position at the moment in the markets where I don't think it's ever been harder for entrepreneurs, small, medium-sized businesses to be successful, to create great experiences, to really stand out from a branding point of view. Yet we've never had better technology. Mm-hmm. And with what's going on with this AI revolution is the tools are there, but how do we educate? How do we get them to use it? And how can they embrace that technology to differentiate their business? And I thought that there's this kind of juxtaposition in terms of where they're at the moment and how they can embrace it and how they can be more successful going forward. So that was my thought as I got onto the train this morning it's just never been more difficult, but there's never been better opportunities.
And I think, is there any particular technology specifically on the horizon that you think maybe that could greatly impact retail, or is there possibly some regulation that you feel could even help? We can be a bit speculative here. Yeah. Is there any way that you think those two worlds could come together?
I don't know. I think that there is. I think everybody's trying to get their heads around AI, right? In every conversation, it's AI. Interesting, I was at a presentation a few weeks ago, and it was talking about the speed to get to 100 million subscribers and how fast Netflix did it and how fast Amazon did it. And then AI did it in like 4 days. Yeah. The proliferation of that technology is vast. But I do think that for people are doing it to write poems or probably to write their dissertations and stuff. But I think more relevant is how do we train small businesses that don't have access to it? How do we train them to get the best out of it? And how many industries are going to be impacted? I mean, you guys must see that must change your industry going forward, right? In terms of how AI gives people power to create their own content. But are they able to do it? And do they have the education to do it? I don't know. I think it's a really difficult but amazing opportunity.
Yeah, I think even we can talk about this. One of our sort of more familiar AI tools recently got bought by another company. And I just sort of said to Paul, well, as people trained originally on Adobe, which was fairly slow in its iterations, we're now living in a world where we just learned a new tool that possibly could just, or our knowledge could just go out of date, depending on that new acquisition, how that goes down. Paul, I don't know if you want to talk a bit more about that.
I think with our industry, it's kind of one of those things where there's people that are in the middle, some are on one side, some are on the other, in terms of like whether they want to kind of accept it, adopt it into their practice, how it could kind of improve what they do. I think for us, the way we've been using it over the last few months and over the last year or so is to help with more of the efficiencies and speed, rather than replacing what creative is or replacing what the ideation process is. Like doing the bits that, let's be frank, that what most designers don't like doing, which is like the iteration, the testing, and if we can do that at speed and then pick through like, shall we say, a set of visuals, be like, oh, that's quite good, that doesn't work, that does, and then you explore that from a designer point of view, not through AI. I think that's when you start actually kind of utilising it to your advantage, and it's not replacing what you do, but actually it's enhancing it and finding ways to get those small wins, essentially.
Yeah, we do a similar thing in our business where we do a lot of coding to build products for the industries that we work in, and we're trying to do the basic bits, right? So the kind of first 20% of the coding, can that just be done by AI so that the basic code doesn't have to be written by a coder? They obviously check everything, and I don't think it'll replace the creative element to it, and nor should it. I just think that it does, as you say, it replaces some of those basics that ultimately makes it more efficient and easier. And I don't know how my kind of pondering, if you will, on the train today was, how do you, and we're, small, medium businesses, Euronet's and ePay's a big business, and we're struggling with how we adopt AI and what's the right way of doing it, and how do you make sure that you're not, trampling on other people's IP or copyright and stuff like that. But how does a small business do it? And the government isn't helping, and they could help. They could help with education. They could help with online training, whatever that looks like, so that small businesses could make use of it and really drive differentiation. You know what I'm like, guys, you work with me enough to know I love experiences, and creating great consumer experience, I think, is the pinnacle of what we should all should strive for. But it is difficult if you don't have the resources to do it or the time to do it, because you're competing with, Joe Blogs down the street and your online retailer and XYZ. It's very, very difficult. So I just think it's a really fascinating space we find ourselves in, where technology has never been more readily available, but the challenges have never been harder.
But for example, at ePay, at that kind of level, what do those conversations look like? How do you turn the tanker, of a larger organisation towards ultimately technology that flips on a dime?
Yeah, and it's such a difficult thing to unpack in terms of how do you embrace it. So we had ePay is owned by a company called Euronet. That's our kind of parent company. We had our Euronet Leadership Summit a month or so ago. 3 days was full of AI. Of how are people embracing it? What should we do? How can we use it? And you said it earlier, and it's right, is the predominant angle was how do we drive efficiency through adopting technology, and AI is obviously the most prevalent of those technologies right now. And we're a tech-savvy company, and so we are ultimately looking at, if there are heavy data sets that we are looking at, let's not use people to evaluate them solely. Let's see if we can use AI engines to evaluate that data set to provide the outcomes that we need. We are certainly, and my team certainly, using AI from a development point of view, again, to ultimately, as I said earlier, to drive efficiency in that coding. But it is ever changing. And so what we are doing now, I guarantee you in 12 months' time, we won't be. We'll be doing different things.
Yeah, because even that conversation of efficiency, something we've been talking about internally in the studio, in terms of just anecdotally in the ad world, efficiency actually kind of was a negative, because there was a lot of cash sloshing around, and inefficiency led to lots of other creatives actually kind of getting a little bit of a snap at the pie. And it's something that we've been talking about with AI. So a lot of the language is around efficiency, but to a degree that kind of centralizes. It hasn't necessarily saved people a lot of money. It has saved time and that. But it's almost like in some instances, that efficiency strips away creative or opportunities.
Sure.
But exactly what you were talking about there actually sounds almost like using it to take away the more grind, the more burden.
Yeah, no, for sure it's that.
And it's sort of like, is there space for it to become play? And I think at a organization your size, how do you differentiate maybe AI for churn and AI for kind of like play or innovation?
Let me give an example. Give an example. So we are trying to use AI in some of our advertising, and marketing material. So if you look at one of the brands we have, it's called Skylight. It's a very, very sexy compliance tool. These things never go together. But they're trying to use AI to create video content, and they're using like a polar bear to do more funny, more interactive ways of getting across the message, because compliance can be a little bit stale, I'm assuming, in that space, but it doesn't seem the most exciting from the outside in. But I think using video content, which is a bit more play, it's a bit more creative, it's a bit more fun, can break down those barriers. And you see it all over the place of just AI advertising. There's a gaming company in the US called Kelshi, which is like social gaming, if you will. And all of their advertising is AI generated video, and they advertised at the Super Bowl. So it is prevalent and can be fun and can help creative, but obviously where my side of the business is, how do we drive efficiency through it? So it can do both. How you embrace both, I think, is really important.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, we met through a mutual connection quite a few years ago. It'd be great to hear kind of how your role has sort of changed over that sort of time, what you're focusing on now. Just a little bit more time to hear about that. No,
that's sure. So it was interesting, actually, because my role at ePay at that point was to look at how we are creating products, our own products. So ePay's background was predominantly gift card business, which is selling other people's content into retail predominantly. Like Xbox, which is obviously my background, because I'm ex-Microsoft, and a plethora of other brands. But what we didn't really have is our own product set. So we're almost, how do we become the masters of our own destiny? And we had to go through a significant evolution of how do you learn to sell your own product? How do you create them? How do you market them? How do you sell them? And so I went through that process. I did that role for 18 months, something like that. Some were successful, some were not. I'll be honest, I'd love to say everything was perfect. That's not the reality of things.
Everything you touched.
I've got the Midas touch, right? That is simply not true. And everybody knows me will know that's not true. But then obviously about 12 months ago, give or take, I was given an amazing opportunity to go and change verticals. So still within ePay, but ePay made an investment into the regulated gaming space. We invested in two really exciting brands based in Las Vegas, one called Coin, one called Marketrax. I'll introduce those in a second. But ultimately, the opportunity to go and look after those businesses from the ePay perspective, help them be more successful, help them with the transformation, and help them support how do they cut through into that digital space in Las Vegas is my role. And so I'm now the chief revenue officer of that business, and it's been a whirlwind. To learn I'm very comfortable to learn it within a business. That's very nice, but to learn completely new verticals is unique, I think, or semi-unique, and not an easy challenge.
And what is it with those particular new verticals that you're finding really exciting at the moment?
So what's interesting is I always think when you go into a new opportunity, new vertical, new company, new anything, I always look back and say, what are the transferable skills? What do you know from the past that you can use to at least fake that you know something about what the new industry is? And so what is interesting is I think there's so many similarities between regulated gaming and retail 5-10 years ago. So gaming is an interesting space in the fact that it's still predominantly cash, because ultimately customers are taking cash into a casino or playing with cash in that way, turning it to chips and playing, or loading it into a slot machine. It hasn't had to change at the speed of other industries. It's a very, very unique, highly, highly regulated, difficult to enter industry. So it's not had to address the same dynamics that retail did, ultimately when that had to embrace digital. And retail didn't. Let's be really blunt about it. For the longest time, retailers and retailing did not embrace digital, and then Amazon came along, which is fully digital and absolutely created that apocalyptic event in retail where you saw all those retailers churn out of the market and force the evolution. Because if they didn't, they were going to die. And, absolutely at the bottom of my heart is I loved Comet as the retailer. I was an account manager at Microsoft. I loved them, right? I thought they were a great family retailer for that space, but they didn't embrace digital.
Yeah.
And they went out of business. Curry's on the other hand has done a reasonable job embracing digital experiences and has survived and is growing and thriving. Consumer or regulated gaming is in that similar position now, as they are talking a lot about cashless at the moment. I hate the terminology cashless, because ultimately what it's saying to that industry is, let's show you when that's gone. It's a real negative way to start that evolution is, well, let's remove that from the industry. I love cash. Cash is great. We have 60,000 of our own ATMs. Of course, I love cash, right? But for me, the conversation is far much about, let's talk about the benefit of digital, not how do we remove cash from your business. And that is all what my experience is in retail. That was always about how do you embrace digital. So I think there's really good synergy of what I've done in the past to what the regulated gaming business should go through over the next 5-10 years as it embraces digital opportunities and creates better experiences. And that is even more important. If you walk into a casino, not just in Vegas, but around the world, the demographic is not, I was going to say me, but I'm older now. It's not tend to be the younger demographic. They tend to be online. So they're in the iGaming space, or sports betting is far more popular with them. If you go into Vegas, it is tend to be the older demographic. Younger people want digital experiences, and also they want it when they want it, how they want it, and the phone has got more power than anything out there, so ultimately that is part of the conversation. And the great thing about Coin is it's a digital wallet, so it's right at the heart of that. And with Markertrax or Muller Play, that's all about digital markers. So we're right in the hub of that digital evolution. There's a lot of transferable skills from what I've done in the past to what I'm doing now.
And I guess with you sort of talk about retail having that kind of Amazon sort of initial spike of like change or die. Is there anything, do you feel, in the regulated space that's kind of forcing that, or is it just an inevitable kind of towards digital?
It is. When you call it regulated gaming, it should be regulated gaming, because there's never been more, regulation in my life. But ultimately, that is driving how do you protect the player, right? Ultimately, you want to make sure that they are playing with what they can afford. In an environment that they're comfortable. And ultimately that will drive a lot of the conversation. You do see some of the stories out there around, bad actors. And ultimately that regulation will force certain transitions. And ultimately what I love about Coin and Markertrax is they're at the heart of that. I believe that although regulation will be the force for change, I do think brands like Coin, Markertrax, and others, it's not just them, but they will be the ones that create great experiences that drive benefit for the operators to adopt it.
And I guess, James, from like the positions that you've been in through ePay to where you are now, in the world of brands, what is it that you've kind of, shall we say, discovered through that process that consumers don't on the outside understand, or that you feel could be kind of understood better? So
my background before ePay was Hewlett-Packard or HP, and then obviously to Microsoft. I think the thing that I don't think people understand is the amount of effort that goes into creating the brands.
Yeah.
They don't just turn up and arrive and they're great. What I always thought was most interesting at Microsoft was that when I was there, and I think it's changing, to be fair, I've not been there for 10 years, so I'm not finger on the pulse there. But we used to have this really interesting position where people loved Xbox, hated Microsoft.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. But the effort that went in to create the coolness of Xbox and how that was unique and a fighter brand and people could really resonate with it was really important to keep it separate to Microsoft. But you don't see it from the outside in that it's the same marketeers, right, that are driving the Microsoft brand that was conservative, reliable, really solid as a brand. But Xbox was cool and dynamic and exciting and would sponsor cool stuff, right? We'd have supercars going around London and we sponsored the London Eye and, some of those cool stuff you wouldn't do with the Microsoft brand, but you could do with Xbox. And you wouldn't do with Office, but you can do with Xbox. I think we sponsored the Ibiza Rocks Hotel at one point as Xbox. You couldn't do that with Office and it be as cool, right?
Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it wouldn't be as good as sponsored Ibiza Rocks. It just doesn't resonate, right? So, but I do think the effort that goes into it, I think, is unknown, and ultimately it's the same marketeers, but they have to understand their demographic, how they're targeting it, and what's the best way of energizing that base.
Yeah, and I guess in your sort of years of experience, have you found any particular strengths or kind of angles that you found to be particularly effective with building those brands? Like any kind of advice that you would give that perhaps still holds true today in our conversation with AI?
Thank God I'm not a marketeer, is what I would say, because if I give any marketers advice, they should run and do the opposite. So, other people who are way more qualified should give that advice. And it's not just for marketing. I think everything that you do as a consumer-facing brand should be obsessed with the consumer. Mm-hmm. The consumer drives what you do, not what you think is the right thing to do. And I say that genuinely for no marketing experience whatsoever. So you guys can say whether that's right or wrong. But whether you're creating experiences, creating products, or creating campaigns, it is to target that consumer. And if they are not the beginning, the middle, and the end of everything you do, you're going to fail. And the one thing that we all have to understand is they have the power. The consumer has the power to walk wherever they want, to go and shop, experience, whatever it is, and buy into their brands. They're going to do it. And so they have to be the heart of everything you do.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something we've been sort of talking about for ages, is almost that like what we call audience-centric approach to it, where it's just a real understanding of, even for me personally, I do find service really interesting, like service design, considering, even silly things like how traffic lights work in a sort of crossing. That is an experience. That is something that people are going to choose to follow the rules and follow the traffic lights, or they're going to
or not.
And yes, we do have laws. I do appreciate that, but I think that's where design can be really powerful, is to understand that at the heart of every business really is the consumer. So therefore, how can you start interacting them in ways that feels authentic to their wants and needs? Otherwise, like you say, similar to Amazon in the retail space, it's a sink or swim kind of environment if that's what people are after. Because equally, Amazon wasn't just a success because that's what people were crying out for, as you mentioned, in that retail space.
And it is still like this thing. I mean, we spoke, I'm a hypocrite. Let's open the first piece of that, is that, so I started this conversation about walking through the high street, worrying about a high street retailer, right? And the experiences of high street retail. I shop more on Amazon than most people, I'm sure. So I'm an absolute hypocrite. I know that, but Amazon is super easy, super efficient. And I reckon I've got daily deliveries to the house on Amazon. So I understand that it comes from hypocrisy that I say that. But ultimately, unless you create something that is worth more than the pieces of it together, consumers will go where they want to go. My wife's got, as I said earlier, my wife's got 2 really successful beauty salons in 2 high streets near where we live. And every evening she's talking about how she can create new experiences for her consumers, more enhanced experiences. Is it subscription services? Is it, better treatments? Whatever it is, it's every conversation she has, she's absolutely consumer obsessed. And I do think that we sometimes lose that, the bigger brands they go, but it's so important to be consumer obsessed. And if the consumers don't like it and you're not reaching out for their feedback, you're going to fail. And I've been in meetings, I won't mention the companies probably, where the biggest voice in the room decides what we do, which is usually the boss, right? But if they're a big personality, what they say goes, and everybody cows to what they say because they're the boss, right? It shouldn't be that. It should be what the consumer says we should do. What's the real feedback that we've got from our consumers that says this is what we should do? This is our next leap in strategy. This is the next product evolution. Not what Joe Bloggs says or believes, because their opinion is irrelevant. The consumer trumps them every single time.
I know we once recently, don't know if you want to obviously cut, not names, but the recent
go on.
The cat store.
Drop some names, go on.
Like we were working with a particular client, you could say, and basically we were having a conversation around familiarity of a particular design. So as an example, we created something, didn't go down too well, and basically the association was that it looked similar to like the Thundercats symbol back in the 70s and 80s. Awesome for the time, but
I'll be honest, Chitara, still a fan. So let's not diss the Thundercats too much.
We all know
that's the hot take.
Yeah, let's not go on this.
It wasn't based on her, unfortunately. But like, I guess with that, what basically just touching upon the kind of consumer and the audience of focus, the focus of this particular brand wasn't people that were born in the 70s or grew up in the 70s and 80s. It's actually more present day, and people that were going to university from all around the world. They've got no association to Thundercats.
No.
And so that kind of element of subjectivity around what something looks like, you're focusing it on from your particular experience and perspective, rather than actually thinking about the end user or what they're going to see. And I think that's everything that we try to do, for instance, at Fellow, is like it's rationale focused. It's trying to remove that subjectivity. And it's not necessarily saying that we're not going to listen to people, because that's very important, but it's like looking at from many different areas. Like you could look at data, cultural trends, insights from the business as well, if they've been around for a while and they've got their own internal insights. It's about pulling those all together alongside surveys, workshops, to really understand what is potentially the problem, the issues, what can we know from research that has been had, and then how can you use that going forward by tweaking and crafting elements of the brand to get where you need to.
And I suppose that must be difficult for you guys as well, right? In the fact that you can know what a consumer wants, and you can talk to that end consumer I'm talking about. You can talk about the end consumer and they go, yeah, this really resonates and we see positive testing. But if your client says, I don't like it, that's a really difficult point, I'm assuming, to manage, right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of part of, I had a really good analogy of the role of like agencies and our kind of businesses. A lot of businesses have refined their business model down to be an exact shape, to fill an exact hole, because that's actually how they're going to be more profitable. And, it's just refining the edges of becoming that monolith. But the truth is the world is a horrible zigzag.
Of course.
And really our kind of role is to be that kind of sort of, in a way, buffer or breaker between those two worlds, where, the classic example of this is, that 15-page deck, can you make it a one-pager? And you're like, how? I'm
really small font.
Really small font, yeah. But I think that's kind of how we sort of see it, is that you obviously have the expertise that you can bring, but part of that is also navigating that experience with the client, taking them on the journey, but also like hearing them out. If they really don't like it, I think it's
understanding why.
Understanding why. I mean, our question just always comes back to just kind of why, and trying to remember the old adage, you have two ears, one mouth.
Yeah.
So,
when we've gone through stuff together and we've kind of managed branding, we've not always agreed everything from the start. And I think that's absolutely fine. You can have creative differences, but I do think that across big or small businesses, the consumer should trump what you think as a business owner, or what you think as an advertising agency, or you think as a marketing person. If you anchor it in what does the end consumer think, and how do we collect that data, and how do we make sure that they really love what we're doing, I think that trumps anybody else's opinion in the room. And I always found that at some of the bigger brands I worked with, the person in the room that had the loudest voice or the most authority made the decision. And I'm desperate as I grapple up the career ladder, is that I don't reinforce that, because it's you try and take some of the learnings as you go, right? And I think that is one of the biggest ones. Is I always want to be listening to what the team do. And I'm not great at it, just to become always learning as you go through. But the thought of that I haven't put the consumer first, or I'm not advocating for the consumer, just fills me with dread.
Yeah, I think especially in today's world, probably along the same sort of analogy, is like it's understanding how we reshape working together. I think we have come from a very like top-down monolithic kind of like you say, I'm the boss, this is my steer, my experience. Where now, especially, just not to always bring it back to AI, but with the sort of knowledge economy becoming sort of shortened by tools like that, and just the fact that everything is changing so quickly, that 15 years experience, for example, what is valuable is changing. It's not that it's not valuable.
No, I agree.
And that's what we've said is now is like, it's working with a partner that maybe doesn't get into the nitty gritty, but it's just sitting back from their brand point of view going like, I'm going to let you do a bit of that because that is exciting in isolation, but I might pull you back on things that might affect me with some of the stuff I'm trying to achieve over here. And I think the more we get into technology, the faster that iteration process, that kind of, like you say, your value as a more experienced person, now that you've got these tools, becomes around in a way, guiding your relationships with other people rather than actually you're kind of, I've done it one way and it's always worked. It's like, actually, might not work at all, but I know how to navigate with you. I can see value in you. I can see value in trying this. And that's their role, is almost like taste or gut. I mean, you've talked about taste before.
I think taste is a hard one, because I think everyone's going to have an opinion about something. So I think a lot of it comes down to whether you've seen it somewhere before in a different category and you're doing cross-category kind of migration of like what could work for a particular brand that's worked elsewhere, but it hasn't been done in your specific field or sector, for instance, which we've seen quite a lot of lately. But I think when it comes down to taste, a lot of it is, to be honest, gut feeling around what it is that you know has worked, and those kind of subtleties or details that someone else may not necessarily see, which you know has a certain level of importance that needs to kind of be considered. So I think when you're starting to see brands now that are looking brand from, like as Anthony was saying, from more of a holistic point of view, from top down, where every kind of element of marketing or interactions with audiences is a brand moment, arguably through engagement or building community or kind of really resonating with a target audience which you want to kind of be part of, or you want them to be part of you. We're seeing that lot more and more, whether that's through, for instance, Aldi or is it Lidl doing their kind of responses on like Twitter through those other conversations with brands, to activations where people are actually inviting their customer base to come experience brands in other different ways. Limited edition runs is becoming quite popular as well. Not only is that financially beneficial for the brand because they can sell everything beforehand and it allows them to oversee their bottom line, but that taste element, I think, also goes into how audiences, shall we say, relate to brands from a lifestyle point of view. And Anthony obviously has an association with Dr. Martens, wanted to be a rock star. You still buy them today.
Stay strong, brother.
Yeah. I mean, the band's not there, but the Dr. Martens boots are still on my feet,
But like, for instance, for myself, I used to wear Dr. Martens as well. Yeah. And actually, from when they were sold, everything moved over, I think it was to China in terms of manufacturing. I saw the kind of quality level go down. For me, it was a quality thing. Yeah. And it was a brand thing. I moved over to Solivare because it was a similar kind of boot, Northampton, similar kind of brand. And you stood strong with brand because of your association with it. And I think that's where that kind of taste, lifestyle, resonance, relatability to what personal goals are and what brand goals are, they're becoming so murky now where you need to listen to the customer.
And I guess kind of on a similar lines, we've been talking a lot about sort of customer experience and technology. Tito Every's 2025 report points up to 43% rise in digital payment fraud cases in Europe. I guess my question is how you're seeing this play out. Why do you think it's happening? And kind of what challenges does it create for you and all your partners?
Do you know what? It is. It's exciting and terrifying all at the same time. I think that the opportunity as we talk about digital and embracing digital is an amazing experience to embrace for consumers. But it does come with risk, right? And ultimately, unless things are secure and you work with secure partners and take security seriously, you're going to open up either yourself or your consumers to risk. We're a $4 billion business that is classed as critical infrastructure because we look at banking, we've got our own ATMs. We spend so much time on security. I can't tell you how often we're rotating passwords, making sure we're not clicking on the wrong email, making sure that consumer experiences are solid and are robust to hackers and things like that. It's the Wild West out there in terms of what's coming in and how many times you're being probed for vulnerabilities. Even to the very basic level of, my mum, God rest her soul, wrote her passwords down in a book and left it by her phone. I'm like, no, you can't do that, because somebody can take that password and they've got access to everything. She said, well, I don't remember. So you have to try and educate about, no, you can use password lockers and this might make it easier for you to remember. But, we're constantly rotating things. It's really difficult. And it's something you have to constantly be vigilant about, whether that's as a consumer or a business.
Is there anything you think in terms of, like, I guess, broad? We see a lot of it, education around. I mean, the amount of cybersecurity courses now that are kind of getting companies.
Yeah.
But let's go full circle on this one for a second. So yes, for Euronet or ePay, we are in cybersecurity education 365 days a year, right? Because there's always new stuff out there, and we have the resources to be able to do that. But how does a small business do it when they don't have the resources available? They don't have the education, but they are embracing digital. I know they can use partners to do it, but it is difficult. You know, if they're not able to buy the best or educate through the best thing, it is really difficult, and there are vulnerabilities out there. And you see the news about the big companies, right, that get hacked. But the small ones are getting hit just as bad.
Yeah.
But nobody talks about it's not exciting to talk about hacking when you've got 50 customers that are hacked, but it's happening. And it is, my heart goes out to them, because it's really tough to understand how do you embrace the technology, drive experiences, but then you are opening up to some level of risk, right? Because ultimately that customer data or that digital transaction is then logged somewhere.
I guess like what you were saying earlier, James, around like your experience with the doctor's appointment, right? Where they outright said, this is an AI response. Now that could be some way around it in terms of if you are utilising an AI receptionist or some form of conversation starter through businesses like that you have to kind of call it out front and centre, so people don't get worried about that kind of thing. Obviously,
I do think that was a really good point you made. I love the fact with this experience it said I'm an AI receptionist. There's a lot of I call it AI fake, where it's pretending to be a real person, and I really don't like it, because I know it's AI. You can tell.
Yeah.
I'd prefer it if it did call it out, to say I am. I wasn't offended by it as a consumer. I was like, cool. I know how to engage with this to get what I need. It's perfectly acceptable. I don't want it to treat my foot, just to be clear.
Yeah.
But ultimately, for what I needed, that was perfect.
Brilliant, James. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
I think we've covered all topics there.
I think we have. I mean, Chitara's the main one, clearly, for the main sort of takeaway for the for the show. But yeah, thanks for coming in and taking the time to speak with us.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
That was a Field Notes episode with James Warden, capturing what's shaping consumer experience, AI, and the regulated gaming space right now. For more conversations and our reports, head over to fellowstudio.com.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Fellow Talk.